Bit of nutrition facts, how to read a nutrition label, in addition to the white chicken chili recipe that we just created. So this is actually the recipe label nutrition facts for the healthy white chicken chili recipe. So I'll just kind of go through what we're talking about. So a lot of the times food labels can be confusing because you see all these milligrams, grams, all these percentages, and then you see these percentages on the side, and you're kind of wondering, how do I go about this? So I'll just kind of run through it with you. So what up top we see a serving size is 1.5 cups for the chicken chili. It should serve 6 people, so that should give about 6 servings. We'll go through here, and then I'll tell you how you can kind of change this up. So depending on how many servings you would like to have, and just kind of how you can change the nutrition information to kind of understand if I have more than 1.5 cups, what do I do, and that type of thing. So total calories are going to be up here. And the total calories in the chicken chili recipe for your 1.5 cup serving is going to be 373. Typically, it's kind of hard to distinguish a daily value percentage. It's definitely going to be on your own body weight, your lifestyle activities. Are you sedentary? Do you work out? Physical activity during the day? How many calories you do need? So there's no percentage, as you can see that there's like a percentage down here. So there's 373, which makes for a really good, definitely a dinner. They say that between, you want to have about 500 calories, 500 to 700 calories per like actual meal, and then snacks a little bit less, so like 250 for snacks. So this is definitely in the good ballpark range. This is without the toppings, so this is just a soup recipe. So if you added some tortilla chips or some sour cream or some cheese of your choosing, this number will go up. So just be conscientious of that. This is just the soup recipe itself. So then now we're going to come down here, and as I said, this is your percent daily value. So your percent daily value is just what the percentage that you have, so like we'll take, for example, total fat. So total fat's 9 grams. So that's 12% of your daily value. So we're talking out of 100%. So you can kind of multiply that by 1, like you can multiply that. So that's about an eighth. An eighth is 12.5%. So you can multiply that times 8. That's 72. So that's 72 grams of fat is typically what your total grams of fat per day should be. So this is going to be that 12%. So you see total fat 9 grams, definitely a lower fat meal, considering this is pretty much a full meal because you definitely have all your food groups in there. As far as your, I want to say not food groups necessarily, but like your macronutrients, so your fats, your carbs, and your proteins. Those 3 staples that every meal should have. So you're going to jump down here to saturated fat. You see there's about 2 grams of saturated fat in here, which there's no daily percentage value for saturated fat. They typically like to say that you should stay between under 20 grams of saturated fat per day, just because saturated fat inherently can increase your risk for like atherosclerosis, so like just like the potential for hardening of your arteries. Definitely saturated fat can play a role in that. Just those saturated fat isn't the bad type of fat necessarily, because we do need some saturated fats in our body, but it's definitely not the type of fat you want. You would want unsaturated fats. So this is a saturated fat. So try to stay below 20 grams all day. And then your trans fats, they really recommend that you have 0 trans fats per day. You won't see a lot of trans fats in foods except your highly processed foods like your junk foods, your snacks, your sweets. But most companies nowadays don't have any trans fats in their food. They really try and make a point to not have trans fats in their food because they are very unhealthy. So then you're going to jump down here to cholesterol. There's 85.8 milligrams of cholesterol in this soup recipe. So you're going to see that's about a third of your daily value. Don't be concerned. If you are watching your cholesterol, definitely if you have been told to watch your cholesterol, definitely keep in mind that, but also remember that dietary cholesterol doesn't directly correlate to blood cholesterol, so don't be scared that if you eat 2 eggs or 3 eggs plus this soup that it's going to be a big problem. You definitely want to make sure that you're watching your red meat intake, which is good that we use chicken in this recipe, Definitely want to watch if you are having to watch your cholesterol. I think that this is definitely, it's still an okay option because you are having your healthy fats, you're having a good source of carbs, fiber, and protein. So just kind of keep that in mind. Then you're going to drop down here to sodium. Your sodium, you see it has 222.5 milligrams, which is about 10% of your daily value. I definitely like using the low sodium canned beans and canned corn and broth because you really cut down a lot on that sodium that you could potentially have. You don't want a lot of sodium. The daily recommended value is about anywhere between 2,200 and 2,500 milligrams of sodium a day. So that's 2,200 to 2,500 milligrams of sodium per day. You want to stay in that daily value. You don't want to eat too much salt just because it can increase hypertensive risk. So if you have high blood pressure, you definitely want to watch your sodium intake not to make that any worse. However, this is just saying that this is about 10% of your daily value and your sodium intake. This is definitely a low sodium option for soups, and you can make it even lower if you kind of cut out any excess salt that you may put in it, using the low canned vegetables that are the low sodium canned vegetables, and there you go. So then total carbohydrates, about 35.5, which is about 13% of your daily value. So again, just kind of multiply that by 8. You're going to get somewhere around like 200 plus grams of carbs. Actually, not 200, I'm sorry. It's going to be probably around more around like 300 grams of carbs, which is your daily grams of carbs per day. So this is what they recommend. Obviously, more advanced people that are more in-depth with their macronutrients and how their bodies operate, whether you have heavy fats, you have heavier carbs, heavier protein, kind of depending on how you want to break down your daily calories, will kind of change these percentages a little bit. But if we're talking about a standard recommended diet for an adult, this is about 13%, and you're getting about 300 grams of carbs per day. This has 35.4, so definitely still a low-carb option. And we'll talk about a little bit more about carbs when we jump down to fiber, but you're definitely getting a good source of carbs in this because the carbs are mostly coming from your beans. Beans have definitely, like I said, a good source of carbs, so you're not really getting it from any kind of fast-acting carbs. You're not any like starchiness. We didn't put any rice in here. We didn't put any noodles. So you're definitely getting it from a wholer source of carbohydrates. So definitely like a longer acting carbohydrate, if you will. It won't like beat you down and you won't be tired after you eat this. It will be a filling meal, but hopefully it won't bog you down. When you go to dietary fiber, like I said, kind of hand in hand with carbohydrates, because we used a lot of beans in here, you do see that there's about a little over 7 grams of fiber, which is very good because the daily recommendation of fiber is about 20 to 25 grams, more towards 25. You could even get as high as 30. But a lot of Americans typically generally get about between 10 to 15. So definitely upping your fiber intake is great because it helps definitely with digestive processes and such. So I think that definitely getting a good source of fiber from this meal, 7 grams is almost it's a little less than, I'd say, a fourth. So it's about a fourth of your daily total fiber requirements. So getting that in one meal is great. And the nice thing is if you're conscientious about carbs as far as like diabetes or if you're carb counting, the nice thing is that you have 35.4 here and you have 7.3 here. So you're thinking what you're going to do is that you have what you do is you take your total carbohydrates and then your dietary fiber, and then you're going to subtract your dietary fiber from your total carbohydrates. So you get 35-ish minus 7, so you're getting about 28.1 grams of dietary fiber, of just total carbohydrates in this meal, which is good because that's even less of a carb intake. So you're not as likely to get that heavy carb spike that you see when you eat junk food, fast food, where you get this heavy carb spike and then you crash a couple hours later. When you come down to sugars, we have about 7 grams of sugar in here. I would say that most of the sugar is going to come from that yogurt that we used. We didn't add any added sugars in here. We didn't add any fruits or anything along those lines, so nothing that would really bump up your sugar intake a lot. You definitely kind of want to tend to stick around. If you're eating a meal, it's a little bit different if you're eating fruit for serving size, but you want to typically tend to stay under 10 to 15 grams of sugar per meal. So this is definitely a good option because you're getting about 7. Not on this label, but on most labels you'll see like a little thing that says added sugars. So you might have total sugar and then you have added sugars. So then the total sugar incorporates like the natural sugar that may be in there, and then the added sugar is what they added into addition to it to make it sweeter. So you want to definitely try to stay away from added sugars because that's just going to be sugar, not really coming naturally sourced. So definitely try to tend to stay away from that. But then, like I said, the sugars in here are about 6.7 grams. A little closer to 7, so definitely a good meal because you're not having any added sugars, and most of it is just coming from that yogurt. Then we're going to pop down here to the protein. This is definitely a great indicator of your this is definitely a great source of protein for the day. As you can see, it has about 3/4 of your daily protein requirement, which is astonishing. But that's really good because the protein sources in here are going to be the beans. Beans are definitely very high in protein. And the chicken that we added in there too definitely boosts it up. So if you do want kind of like a less protein dense meal, you could always just remove the chicken and then keep the beans in there. And that would make it vegetarian because the beans themselves are going to have enough protein for a good meal. If you wanted to lower that protein, if you say ate a chicken breast for lunch and you don't want to boost too much over your daily protein goal, you could definitely just remove the chicken and make it vegetarian and still have a good source of protein and keep that fiber that we really want. So like I said, about 3/4 of your daily protein intake from this meal alone, which is great because a lot of people tend to not get enough protein sometimes, especially when we tend to gravitate towards processed foods. So just knowing a good whole protein source, you're not eating a protein bar, which are good in a pinch, but overall you want to just get your protein sources from whole sources of protein like chicken, beans, any other meat you may eat, eggs, depending on your lifestyle. If you're vegetarian, if you're vegan, there's tofu, beans are still vegan. So just making sure that you keep that in mind with these nutrition facts. Overall, this meal is a very healthy meal. It's going to be satiating because it's got all those 3 macronutrients that we want, our good fats, our carbs, and our protein. So hopefully it'll keep you full and that it won't allow you to get super sleepy after this and have a carb crash. So thank you for watching the video. Feel free to comment if you have any questions, and thank you very much.